The recall election of Governor Gavin Newsom now in its final phase, and the outcome could have national implications.
Ballots have been mailed to all registered voters asking whether the governor should be replaced, and if so, by whom.
Radio host Larry Elder wants the governor recalled. He wants to replace him. He is leading in all of the polls as the replacement candidate, and he joins us now. Larry, great to see you.
Alex, thank you for having me. You referred to me as a radio host. I'm also somebody who once owned a small business. I ran it for 14 years. It didn't go bankrupt. I didn't liquidate it. I sold it, and it kept going on for years and years. I only mention that because one of the problems I think we're having in Sacramento is because a lot of these people have never run a lemonade stand. They pass all sorts of rules and regulations and make it hard for businesses to operate and cost a lot of middle-class jobs to leave California. So I'd like people to emphasize the fact that I have practical experience, real-world experience, not just yapping on talk radio.
But you've never held political office.
Well, you know what? Neither did AOC. She used to be a bartender. That didn't seem to hold her back. A guy named Ronald Reagan came out of Hollywood. He wasn't writing and thinking about these issues for 27 years, as I have been. He became a pretty decent two-term governor, pretty decent two-term president. So there are a lot of people that have not had experience that turn out to be okay. My opponent has had a great deal of experience. He was elected twice as mayor of San Francisco. He had 8 years to spend as a lieutenant governor of California to plan what he would do as governor. And for the last 2 years, we've seen a rise in crime, a rise in homelessness, a decline in the quality of public education, and people leaving California for the first time in our state's 170-year history. So practical political experience without common sense doesn't get you very far.
He would say that the COVID numbers in California right now are better in other states better in this state than in other states because of his policies. Here's a question, though. Right now, we see the Delta variant sort of exploding in this state. If things get worse, is there any scenario where you would change your current idea that we need no mask mandates and no vaccine mandates?
Well, the Delta variant seems to be afflicting mostly people who have not been vaccinated. I have been vaccinated. I'm not anti-vax because of my age, because of other comorbidities. My doctor strongly recommended that I be vaccinated, and I was. And it strikes me that the people who are being affected mostly by the Delta variant are people who've not been vaccinated. Furthermore, the symptoms that people are having are far less severe than they used to be. The hospitalizations are up, but the deaths aren't really up that high. And remember, the whole reason that we shut down the state was to buy time for vaccines and to buy time for treatments and to make sure that we did not have a rush on our healthcare system. There wouldn't be a rush on ventilators and on ICUs. And it seems to me so far our healthcare system is being able to handle this. So virtually everybody in California who wants to be vaccinated has been vaccinated. Poor people can get the vaccination for free if they want to. And a lot of people have made the decision for various reasons not to be vaccinated. Some people have already had the coronavirus, so they have antibodies. Some people have a healthy distrust of government. And I want to remind you that it was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris who both said that if Donald Trump told them to take the vaccine, they wouldn't. So a lot of people apparently have taken their advice. I think we still live in America. We still have freedom. And Thomas Jefferson warned about trading freedom for public safety, and I think he was right.
What they said was that they wanted to hear from the health experts, including Dr. Fauci, all of whom have said that you should take the vaccine, including President Trump this weekend saying it as well. All right, Marla.
And I just want to follow up on that. So 2-to-1 Democrats outnumber Republicans in this state. A lot of Democrats are for the vaccine mandates, the mask mandates as well. If you become governor and you erase those mandates, and in fact, not just the caseload, not just cases increase, but if deaths start to increase and people are dying, what would you do about that?
Well, I am not going to impose a top-down system when I become governor, to the extent that there are statewide mandates for face masks, statewide mandates for vaccines for state workers. Those are going to be repealed. The governor just now said that anybody who's a state worker who's not been vaccinated will be tested once a week, and he or she will have to wear a mask at work. Now think about that. I thought the whole point of getting vaccinated is that you're protected against people who've not been vaccinated. And if you assume the risk that you're going to contract the vaccine, why do you have to wear a mask to protect yourself against other people who assume the risk? I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. But as for what local districts do, what local schools do, and what the private sector does, they can make their own decisions.
So, I mean, let's look at some other states, though, where they're following basically what you're saying. In terms of deaths per 100,000, Louisiana at 1.21, Florida at 1.06, Texas at 0.48, California at 0.17. Is that not proof that what the governor is doing when it comes to vaccine requirements and mask mandates is making us safer than some of these other states?
Well, you also ignore some of the ancillary costs. As I mentioned, 1/3 of all small businesses are gone forever. Suicides are up. Domestic violence is up. Opioid addiction is up. Domestic violence, as I mentioned, is up. So there are also other ancillary things that need to be taken into consideration as well. Other states are doing other things. States are different demographically. So there are lots of factors that make it difficult to compare state by state. But I believe that we ought to rely on the common sense of Californians. We know that masks do work. We know that social distancing works. We know that vaccines work, especially if you're in high-risk categories. And again, virtually everybody in California who wants a vaccine has been able to get a vaccine, and poor people have been able to get a vaccine for free. A lot of people have made different decisions. I was in Palm Desert not long ago, and I went to a coffee shop, and I noticed that half the wait staff was wearing masks, and half the wait staff was not. And I asked the young lady who waited on me, very charming young lady who turned out to be a college senior, what the policy was. And she said, well, my boss allows us to wear a mask or not wear a mask. And I said, you have no mask. Have you been vaccinated? She said, no. I said, may I ask why? And she said, you can ask, but I don't have to give you a reason. And isn't that America? Isn't that the country that we're still in?
All right, let's switch gears and talk about education now. You are for school vouchers, for school choice. How are you going to get any of your ideas passed when you have a Democratic supermajority in the legislature?
Well, my understanding is there's going to be a ballot initiative to set up education savings accounts so that the $15,000 we're spending per student goes into that account, and the parent will control that to determine whether or not they want that parent to send their kid to a government school or to a private school or to a charter school or to a religious school, or even use the money for homeschooling. We are abysmal in our test scores, and we're near the bottom of all 50 states. 75% of black boys cannot read at state levels of proficiency, and those levels are not high. 50% of third graders cannot read at state levels of proficiency. Again, those levels are not high, and our math scores are even lower. It turns out that polls show that black and brown parents want choice in school. The number one impediment to choice in school is the teachers union, and they're the number one funder of my opponent. So I'm going to push choice. I'm going to be pushing this education savings account initiative that's going to be on there. And I think a growing number of people recognize that the number one route to escape poverty is to get at least a high school education, one presumably where you can read, write, and compute at grade level, and all too often that is not happening.
So essentially what you're saying is to go around the legislature and try to put this on the ballot, next November, and then let the people decide.
That's right. And I have a lot of power dealing with a hostile legislature. 2/3 of the legislature, as you know, is Democratic. I can declare a public emergency, which I will do on homelessness, so I can unleash the private sector to build more low-cost housing, which is a factor as to why we have a problem with homelessness. I'm also going to declare a public emergency on water. We have not added to our water infrastructure system in about 50 years when the state was half the size it is. There are lots of projects all ready to go. They're being held up by the fear of lawsuits. I'm going to declare a public emergency on water and do something about that. But again, this is a problem that we're having because altogether you add up all these problems and people are leaving California for the very first time. Our state is 170 years old, and for the very first time we're having a net migration out of California. There's a new study that just now came out today by the Hoover Institution talking about all the businesses that are leaving. The rate at which businesses are leaving California for the first 6 months of 2021 is twice the rate at which businesses have left the last 2 years. And the number one reason they cite is the cost of living, number two, taxes, number three, regulations. I'm going to roll these back when I become governor.
But isn't that the critique against Governor Newsom, the fact of government overreach, that he went around the legislature, that he did the state of emergency, and that's essentially what you're saying that you would do as well if you become the governor of California? What's the difference?
Is California running out of water? Yes. Is that an emergency? Yes. Did Gavin Newsom shut down the state against science when the CDC said under precautions you could send kids back to in-school education? Yes. I think he abused his powers. I'm not going to abuse mine. Do we have a problem, a real problem with housing, which is one of the factors for homelessness? Yes. I think that I'll be able to use my powers in a sensible way. I've consulted with lawyers as to whether or not what I'm suggesting is sensible and doable and legal, and I've been given the advice that it is. There are some instances where you overreach, obviously. I don't intend to do that.
But wouldn't you say that a once-in-a-generation pandemic is an emergency?
I didn't say it wasn't an emergency. I said I'm not going to have a top-down, one size fits all way of dealing with it. That every municipality do this. Rely on the common sense of Californians to do this. We understand this is a serious pandemic. We know that vaccines work. We know that social distancing works. We know that face masks work. Let businesses decide that. I think the cost of 1/3 of all small businesses being shuttered forever is pretty high. And when you consider the price of dealing with the pandemic, you've got to consider things like that. And domestic violence on the rise, and opiate addiction on the rise, and suicide on the rise. All of those things need to be taken into consideration before you make a decision on what to do. And I'm going to take all those things into consideration.
All right, as the one and only female up here, allow me, Mr. Elder. Of course, you've gotten a lot of attention for that 2000 article that you wrote in Capitalism magazine, in which you said, and I think we have it up there to show you as well, women know less than men about political issues, economics, and current events. You were citing an Annenberg School study. More broadly, how do you view women? What's your view of women?
No. More narrowly, let's talk about the article that I wrote. I quoted the Annenberg study, which is a left-wing journalism department within the University of Pennsylvania, and I quoted a female professor who said that there were 25 questions that were asked of men and women. Men knew more than the women did in 15 of those questions. They knew the same in 9, and women knew less in 1 of them. And one of the reasons, according to this female professor, who's still around, liberal professor, she said the reason that women knew less is because they get the bulk of their news, from local news. And she said, and I'm quoting her, local news makes you dumber, close quote. Now, I watched a lot of local news, so I guess it makes me dumber. What I also said in that article is women knew more about so-called she issues, Social Security, healthcare, and education, and they were more concerned about those issues than men. And they were more concerned about taxes, the economy, and foreign policy. That's all I said. I'm simply citing a study that was done 21 years ago by the Annenberg School. Now, all of a sudden, that makes me anti-women. I think that's extremely unfair.
I didn't say you were anti-women. I simply
I
wanted. I simply wanted.
My critics would call me anti-women. My critics would call me anti-women, citing this study of 21 years ago. I've written 1,100 articles, including an article in which I talked about the fact that young women make more money than young men. There are more women in college than men, and the numbers of women in law school and in medical school have now equaled the number of men in law school and medical school. For some reason, that was not cited. But Larry Elder now all of a sudden is anti-female. It's ridiculous. It has nothing to do with why I'm running. I'm running to deal with crime. I'm running to deal with homelessness. I'm running to deal with the rise of cost of living and the crappy quality of public education. Kids are getting K through 12, especially in urban areas, and the fact that people are leaving California for the first time. These are ancillary issues that my critics bring up because they don't want to deal with what's going on. 1.7 million people signed a petition, and nearly 1/3 of them were independents and Democrats who just voted for this man 2 years earlier. That's why I'm running. The rest of this stuff is a distraction.
I certainly don't mean it to be a distraction. There's a lot of women, I'm sure, who voted yes to on the petition to get the governor recalled. You're going to get women who vote for you in this election. Just generally speaking, though, your overall view of women.
My general overall view of women, well, their IQs are 100, men's IQs are 100. They're equally smart. More women are in college than men. 90% of the people who are in prison are men, not women. Women are less violent. I have a healthy respect for women. Many of the people in my campaign, the senior staffers of my campaign are female. My communications director is a female. My director of fundraising is a female. One of my chief strategists is a female. My mother was a female. I had her on my radio show every Friday for almost 10 years and was the most popular of my show. And by the way, my mother was a Democrat. I couldn't convince her to change her party, but I did get her to vote for George W. Bush twice. I have a healthy respect for women.
Larry, let's talk more about you. I mean, you've obviously been around for a very long time. A lot of us have known you for a long time, but it's a whole different deal now being in sort of the middle of this storm. What do you think is the biggest misconception about you that's going around right now, and help us clear it up?
Where do you want me to start? The LA Times said that I'm the black face of white supremacy. Now, that's kind of interesting. And the reason they say that is because I don't believe that racism is a major problem in America. I don't believe that racism holds anybody back. We're crying out loud. Barack Obama got elected and reelected, and he got a higher percentage of the white vote than John Kerry did 4 years earlier. My father came here in 1945 from the Jim Crow South, as did my mother. And my father always told my brothers and me to work hard, that you can't control the outcome, but you're 100% in control of the effort. And if you do that, you'll be just fine. And that was way, way, way before many of the laws and measures that have been passed since then. So the idea that racism holds you back is a canard, and I believe it is hurting this country. I also believe it's hurting relations between the Black community and the police. When you call the police officers systemically racist, they're going to pull back, crime goes up. The very people that are hurt by that rising crime are Black and brown people that the left claims they care about. You're also doing something else too, Elex. You're training young Black men not to comply when they're pulled over. Many of the deaths and high-profile shootings would have been avoided had the civilian, had the suspect simply complied. My father told me when you get pulled over by the police, say yes, sir, say no, sir, say yes, ma'am, say no, ma'am. Make sure your left hand is at 10 o'clock. Make sure your right hand is at 2 o'clock. Make sure your paperwork is in order. And if you feel you're mistreated, get a badge number. If that advice had been followed by Michael Brown, by Jacob Blake, by Eric Gardner, by Freddie Gray, we would not have the tragedies that we've had. So you're making things worse by falsely accusing police officers of engaging in systemic racism. You're also causing officers to retire early. Police stations are having recruitment problems, so that in Chicago, they're down 1,000 officers. And the former police commissioner of New York, Ray Kelly, says now only 7% of officers say they would recommend the job to a friend or to a family member. This is hurting stuff. And so I'm going to turn that around with the bully pulpit I'm going to have as governor. I think I may be able to change some of the rhetoric that I think has been negatively impacting America.
Let's talk about your family for a moment as well. I know you were close with both of your parents. They're so instrumental to your success. You've written about that a lot. And the unfortunate reality is both of them are no longer with us physically anymore. I'm wondering for you, do you think about them and what they would think about their son, Larry Elder, now being the front runner to be the next governor of California?
Elex, I think about them every single day, and my father would probably not have wanted me to run because my father would have been concerned about the unfair scrutiny that I knew I was going to get. My mother would be gleeful. My mother is the one who got me into politics. She was always far more interested in politics than I am. And I always told my mother, she's really, really tough, Elex. She always told my brothers and me, nobody can make you feel inferior without your permission. And I always told my mom, if she ran for office, she'd be governor. If she went into crime, she'd be Jack the Ripper.
Do you think you'd be able to switch her over to the Republican side now?
I got a feeling she'd vote for me. She might not change her heart, but she'd vote for me. By the way, I also have two brothers, both of whom are gone. My older brother was my best friend. He died on September 13, 2019, Friday the 13th. My little brother, Dennis, was diabetic. He died about 35 years ago. So I have no close family anymore, but I know they're watching from above, and I think they would be pleased.
And just lastly, what's the biggest surprise of actually doing this, of going through this process? How is it maybe different than you thought it would be? And
if you do win the governorship, and
can I win? Please, don't be negative.
And you no longer have...
You guys are brutal. You guys are brutal.
Your career in broadcast and radio, would you miss that?
You know, I miss being on radio a lot less than I thought, and I'm enjoying running for office a lot more than I thought. I thought it would be difficult to ask people for money, but I remember Senator Phil Gramm from Texas years ago. He ran. He was kind of an obscure senator. He didn't get very far, but he used to say, if I'm not happy about who I am and what I am, and if I don't believe in what I believe in, I couldn't ask people for money. But as long as I believe in what I believe in, I don't have a problem asking people for money. And I found out that I don't have a problem asking people for money. I was told that you're going to spend about 75% of your time asking people for money, and that's exactly what I have been spending. And I knew that it was going to be brutal. I knew that anything and everything I ever said would be dredged up. I've been on radio for 27 years, and for most of my career, Marla, about half of my career, I was on for 4 hours a day, not 3 hours a day. There's almost 27,000 hours of programming. I've written about 1,200 articles because I've been a syndicated columnist ever since April of 1998. And so far, the best they can do is come up with a handful of things taken out of context to make me appear to be some sort of bad, mean guy who's going to do everything but reenact slavery. It's been almost kind of amusing. I think I'm doing far better than I thought I would do. I'm way ahead of my rivals, even though one of us on this panel criticized me for not showing up on a debate, claiming that it was going to be the death knell of my candidacy. It hasn't done anything. I knew it wouldn't do anything. If anything, my lead has increased. So things are going pretty well. I'm not going to identify who that panelist is, but Marla, I think you might know who it is.
Yes, we wanted you to come to the debate, and there's great value in coming, but clearly you're doing a pretty good job of running your campaign strategy so far, Larry. It's a great privilege to talk to you. Thank you for being so generous with your time. I hope you'll join us on our statewide political show again soon, because it's such an important conversation. We appreciate you having it with us.
And come back at 7 o'clock again. Thank you, Larry.
And please go to electelder.com, throw something in the tip jar, because this guy can raise an unlimited amount of money. I cannot. Electelder.com.
He has no problem asking for money, including on this show. Larry Elder, great to see you. Good luck and stay safe on the campaign trail.
Thank you. You got it. Thanks, guys.
All right.